Hi everyone, welcome to Hot Seat with Cognizant Clay. I am your host, Clayton Terrio. Today on the show we have Brad Bowden. Brad is a Paralympic athlete who has represented Canada in both basketball and sledge hockey. He is one of the only Paralympic athletes to have gold medals in both the Summer and Winter Paralympics. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Well, first of all, man, thanks for doing this. I'm pretty excited.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime, anytime. So, just to start off, how are you doing during all this quarantine, this COVID-19 craziness?
I'm hanging in there. I mean, it's getting to, it's kind of wearing on me a little bit. And then I had my birthday, on the 26th there, and then I broke my tooth. So that's probably one of the worst things that's going on right now is I got to fix a tooth and wait for the dentist to, how the whole dental service is going to open back up in the next couple of weeks, I hear. But I don't know, man. I've been all right. I don't have a much of a family really right now. I'm living on my own and stuff like that, and checking on my friends every now and then. But I mean, been pretty much just a hermit and just staying at home, and it hasn't been too bad.
Yeah, it's pretty rough for everyone, but it is what it is, right? It's not,
Hmm.
it sucks, but it's if it's beyond your control, there's nothing you can do, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I usually just start off. So for my guests who don't know, you were born with sacral agenesis, which is very similar to spina bifida. Can you talk me through a little bit of the challenges that are involved with that condition?
Yeah. I think Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, I can walk with crutches. I used to walk around a lot with crutches, and I have full sensation from what I know. I mean, I don't know what it's like to feel somebody else's body, but I mean, I've got full sensation from what I can tell. And I grew up really short. My spine isn't fully intact with my hips as much as it should be normally, but it hasn't really affected me too bad. I've heard of other people who have had worse cases where they've had to like amputate their legs and that, but nothing of that nature ever happened to me when I was growing up, and been pretty thankful to be able to have a bit of a useful body, more so in like sports and stuff, I would say. But yeah, it's just kind of affects, you know, just the way that I walk. I can't straighten out and stuff like that, and my legs are a little bit crooked. I look like a abstract art piece, basically. So like a lot of people with their disabilities. So it's I don't know. It's kind of hard to pick how it really affects me now, but I mean, I guess I use a wheelchair most of the time, so that's a bit of a limitation. But other than that, it hasn't really bothered me too much that I could tell.
Right, and I interviewed Melanie Houghton yesterday, and she said like, it is what it is. I've lived my whole life with it. It's hard at 30 something years old to say what issues there are anymore because you just learn to manage it, right?
Hmm.
And that's
Exactly.
just it. And growing up, how did you overcome the difficulties?
I was pretty lucky because I grew up in the boonies. My grandparents moved. They got custody of me. I was raised by my grandparents, and then they bought this place out in the middle called Orton, and it was in between Orangeville and Fergus, somewhere around there. And just this little village, 3 acre lot with a bungalow that they built. And to be honest, I never really thought much about it. It wasn't until I started getting into my older years, like high school, when I was thinking more about dating girls and wanting to have have like a sex life and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right? And then it kind of, you're like, oh well, I can't be doing this, and I can't be crawling like a monkey all the time. Like, what girl's gonna want to, So then little things like that started to affect me psychologically, and I started to identify those as kind of issues. But I crawled around most of the time. I got in my chair and I would just go up and down the back. We had like this old trail where the railroad used to go back there, and they took it out obviously. And but there's just a beautiful path back there. I used to go up and get lost in the forest a bit every now and then on my own. And it was a great place for me to grow up because it was the perfect area for me to just be a kid and get to take it all in at the pace that I could take it all in without even realizing that there was maybe something a little bit different in the way that I was doing things. So it wasn't until I started going into like the school systems and being around other kids and stuff that I really noticed too much about the troubles of my disability. I think it was more so I was noticing just how things weren't set up for people with disabilities, and how I was being very inconsistently conceived by different people in society, and like people treating you differently in school, and you're learning who your friends are versus who are not your friends in that. But yeah, it was, I don't know, I didn't really notice too much of it affecting me all that much, that I really spent much time thinking about it.
Right, and I think that's normal as a teenager. You think, well, are girls going to want to date me? Like, what's going on? But then you kind of, like you say, you manage it, and some people it's more evident than others. Who would you say was the most influential in your life to stay positive and keep motivated?
I would say my grandmother, and actually both of my grandparents were very positive people. They, looking back, and I think even more so now that they're gone, and I'm in, close, veering into my 40s soon. Thinking back, you think a lot about what your parents did and how they brought you up and what they said and things that stick out. And I always found that whenever I got down on myself, they didn't really let me stay down very long. There was always something that was said right away to just be like, hey, like you might not be able to do this the way that you want to do it, but there are 100 other ways to do something. So you just have to find what way works best for you. And that was always their attitude, because I always just got down on myself about, the fact that I wasn't very tall, and people, a lot, like I said, back to girls again, girls like tall, dark, handsome guys. And, I'm a short guy in a wheelchair with a disability, and I didn't really, get much attention. And I think that bothered me as a young kid. Um, but then, even then, my grandparents like found a way to just, there's like, there's somebody out there for everyone. And, yada, 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 looks aren't everything. And it's more than looks, and it's more than this, and it's more than height, and blah, blah, blah. So they really instilled a bit of a philosophy in my mind that kind of allowed me to stay on track. But yeah, they were pretty much my biggest positive influences growing up, for sure.
Right, for sure. And so just moving on here, you play sledge hockey for the men's national team here in Canada. Um, the first question I wanted to ask you, just out of curiosity, is do you remember like when it clicked in your mind that you knew you wanted to do like play sledge hockey competitively?
Yeah, I remember, because when I first started, I didn't want to do it. My grandmother kind of forced me into it. She dragged me out and had another friend do it, because I mean, kids don't really want to do things that are new, right? So especially to get into a disabled sport, which had such a stigma attached to it at the time. And I was, someone that just played with my able-bodied friends and didn't think much of it. But the moment that I realized that the sport was for me, as soon as I got into a sled and got on the ice, and I could see how a lot of the stick handling skills that I had were transferable into sledge hockey, as well as having that feeling of gliding on the ice and that sense of freedom. And I think a lot of people that play hockey can attest to that feeling. Just you're out on the ice and the breeze in your face and the cold air, and just you push and you glide, and you get what you get right out of your push. So the harder you work, the more you go. And to me, like, that just kind of resonated into my mind and kind of caught me. And I just kind of fell in love with being out on the ice in that capacity. Even though it wasn't able-bodied stand-up hockey, it was just, I was like, this is my hockey. Like, this is
Right.
definitely something I could do. So
Yeah, definitely. And that's it's always a cool feeling. Like me personally, I haven't been able to play ice hockey because I have muscular dystrophy, but I did play wheelchair hockey for a few years, and just the feeling of being able to do it is just so, it's like freeing. It's like freedom, you know what I mean?
mm-hmm. It
And for
totally is.
sure. And you've also represented Canada in wheelchair basketball. I'm interested, how did that come about?
Well, wheelchair basketball was the first sport I got into. Once again, my grandmother. She couldn't stay off the phone, I guess, and wanted to get me involved in competitive sports somehow. So she found a basketball program in Brampton, I believe, that had just an inclusive program starting. And then through that, I went to my first tournament at Variety Village, and Sunrise Medical actually was giving out a Rookie of the Year award for that tournament, and they awarded me with a Rookie of the Year award. And through that, I got my first wheelchair basketball chair from them. And so it was a quickie chair. And it was just, as soon as I got that chair, I think that's when everything really just took off, as far as like realizing how much more fun it was going to be to have my own equipment and stuff like that. So that was kind of like the tipping point into to playing competitive sports for me as a kid was as soon as I got that chair. And then eventually I found out about sledge hockey through other basketball teams and stuff. So it was pretty much the start.
Awesome. And what are the similarities between the two sports to you? Like I'm curious about that too.
I mean, the teamwork, obviously, like team sports are team sports. So, but I think for me, the biggest thing was it took a lot of the negative, like it took a lot of the dumb rules out of basketball. Like when I took everything out of basketball into hockey, the first thing that you think about that's awesome is there's no out of bounds. So the ball, that you don't have to worry about a ball going out of bounds. You don't need to maintain possession the whole time and hold on to it. If you want to put a puck in the corner, you can put it up against the boards and it doesn't get whistled like basketball for going out. So I like that. That was a pretty cool transferable skill and kind of something that I used more so just as like a plus. The lanes are the same, 3-on-1 drives, 2-on-1 plays. It's all about just positioning and making the defense, react and so forth. So like all of the strategic stuff as well as passing and the drives and just going behind players and all those, reverse plays and stuff like that. Very similar setup. And I found it to be pretty easy to kind of, once I learned the hockey culture and like the hockey strategy way of doing things, I kind of implemented the basketball stuff over into that. But I feel like basketball built a good foundation for me to learn how to improve individual skills. And then I took it over into hockey, and that's where I really excelled because of my body type, first of all. And I just found that hockey was more of kind of my passion over basketball, but I did love playing both.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it is hard. Like you say, that there's not a lot of similarities, but the basic ones you can definitely take over to the other sport. Like, the team element is very similar, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have won several golds in sledge hockey at the World Championships, as well as gold in 2006 in Torino, and you've also won gold in basketball for Canada. First off, personally to you, what does it mean to represent Canada at such a high level?
It's an honor. I mean, it's now that I'm not currently playing right now on the team. I've taken a couple years off. I've been injured and just kind of bouncing back and figuring out what I want to do. Looks like I'm kind of retired right now, but what I've really missed is just it's all the people that, not only just all of Canada and those people that you don't know, and just how beautiful it is to be able to put that jersey on itself. I think more so for me, it was just knowing that I was living out a dream that other people have, and that I was capable of doing that, and thinking about all of the adversity that I had to overcome with the team and all of the late night drives that my parents had to do and early morning drives and horrible storms. Like it just seemed like every time I put the jersey on, I kept thinking about the people that were dreaming to be in the spot that I'm at and eventually will be working to get there, and just how lucky and grateful I am for that, but also just how lucky I am for all the help that I had that got me to that point as well. So definitely very patriotic kind of feeling going with that as well. So it's kind of a weird, I think it's different for a lot of people, but for me, it was just about people and just who got me there. So.
Right. And it's probably incredible. Like it is probably hard to put into words, I could imagine, because it's just it's almost surreal. Like I've heard from a lot of athletes that it's almost like you're dreaming at first. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just fascinating. And just to add, like, who were some of the top teammates you remember, and like maybe some of the good memories from those times that really resonate with you?
I mean, obviously all of the times we won championships. So like 2006 was great. It was there were so many great people on the team that, I mean, won't be able to mention all of them, but I mean, like I'm good friends with Billy Bridges still, Greg Westlake, still talk to Paul Rosen. He did a interview with me not too long ago, and we went over some memories as well. But like for me, it's just there's obviously like the little funny things behind the scenes that you don't really like, just the gags and like some of the, like the off-color jokes or whatever, like just moments like that are funny. But like for me, I think it was more just the memories of like being able to go and explore the world together. being on a bus and just knowing that you're with a team in the middle of nowhere in like Korea or like Italy, so new, and everybody's just excited. But then like around the corner, you've got this feeling that you got a big game, you know, and you got this big moment coming. But it was pretty cool. I got to just kind of see the world and live a pretty amazing life with a good group of guys that really did feel more like family than just a hockey team. So, and got to have each other's backs too. There's nothing more important than learning, you know, how other people can have your back and look out for you when you're in those new areas as well too, right? So it was a pretty cool experience, and got to learn a lot of history about a lot of different countries too.
Yeah, for sure. That I think the cultural aspect is probably pretty crazy because everywhere's so different, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's people, but at the end of the day, the culture, the difference in cultures would amaze me. It's probably hard to see the whole place when you're competing the whole time, right?
Yeah. Well, and from an accessibility thing too, I mean, which is you focus on, like it was a very good eye opener for me just to see how good we have it in Canada versus, you know, how another country might face accessibility and how people living there with a disability might have to get around. And, you know, like Japan's got heated sidewalks and accessible toilets that do stuff, and like the rooms are all to scale, like perfectly for what you need. And then, you know, and the snow doesn't melt in certain crosswalks. And then you come to North America and you're like, why can't we do this? Like, this is weird. So it was an educational experience that way too, but very interesting.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that part because that's important to my cause just to, you know, get the awareness out there too. Like everywhere is so different. And you mentioned Billy Bridges and Greg West. Like I actually have them lined up as guests as well. And I'm the Greg is from Oakville, which is where I'm from, and
Mm-hmm.
he's quite the icon here. So I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah, I bet.
And I have a little segment here called Rapid Fire that I do with my guests, just to ask a few random questions.
Okay.
Um, who is your favorite person from Ontario?
My favorite person from Ontario? Oh man, that's kind of leaving me open to offend some friends.
I've been
From
told that
Ontario,
before.
my favorite person who I looked up to the most, I think, from Ontario, in the sports kind of angle as well, I would say Bobby Orr.
That's a good one. I like
Yeah.
that one. What is your favorite thing to eat?
I really love pho,
Yeah.
Vietnamese pho. That's like one of my main go-tos. I can't wait to roll into a restaurant when all this is kind of toned down and get a big bowl of pho.
Yeah, no
So
kidding.
yeah.
Outside of Canada, what is your favorite place that you've competed in? You can give me a few if you want, but I'm just curious because you've been so many places competing.
Japan was pretty cool. I got to go there quite a bit. Um, I also love Korea. It's a pretty good spot. And I think it's really weird to say this, but I quite enjoyed Russia. Just a different vibe. And what I found was really cool about that was, although there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we didn't even know, the games itself were amazing. And just the fact that so many Russian people were interested in seeing Paralympic sport too kind of rubbed me the right way as far as their culture goes, and just seeing how they view sport, whether it's disabled or able-bodied. I like that. So they have a lot of cool things going on there as far as disabled sports and how they treat their athletes. But yeah, Japan was one of my favorites there, and Russia was pretty cool. But Japan, we were there and the tsunami hit, so it kind of ruined my view of that. But still one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, it's two really different cultures, but it's really cool. I didn't know that about Russia. I knew they treated their able-bodied athletes good, but a lot of the countries I find the Paralympics are really starting to take off, which is really good to
Mhm.
see because you guys are just as amazing as the normal Olympics. There's no different. The skill level are both very, very intense.
Yeah.
I've
Well, the
noticed.
thing that not a lot of people know is like if a Korean athlete in the Paralympics comes in first, second, or third, they're still going home and getting some. They get paid depending on where they place. So they might get enough for a car. They might get enough to like compensate for how much money that they put into training through the year or whatever. So I don't know what the Russians get paid when they win or whatever, but it must be a lot of money as well, because like, even though the doping scandal happened, you got like, they didn't discriminate in their cheating. Like their disabled athletes cheated just as much as their able-bodied athletes cheated. So for me, in a morbid kind of way of looking at it, it's like they still hold the athletes around the same level, even when it comes to cheating.
Right.
So I was like, it's kind of interesting, but they value their sports over there for sure. So to me, it was just interesting how they view it, because then over here you win and you go home, and if you're lucky enough to get a sponsor or find a way to build something for yourself after, a lot of people just kind of fade away, and not everybody's so good at trying to find a way to use that when their career's over. But
right, it's very interesting. Thanks for the little lesson there.
I know nobody's a fan of Russians and stuff like that right now with everything going on in the past, but I just thought it was a cool culture. Definitely new.
Yeah, definitely different. This might be a little hard. I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but what is your proudest moment outside of your sporting career?
My proudest moment outside of my sporting career. I think the proudest moment, I think when I graduated college, it was pretty proud. Like that was a proud moment for me, because I always wanted to go to school. I struggled because I was playing on 2 teams at the time. And then I got cut from the basketball team. So I used that as an opportunity to dedicate some time to school. And I took a 3-year graphic design program with a art fundies program before that for a year. So I did 4 years during coming into 2010. So, but I was pretty happy and proud of myself. And I think my grandfather was pretty proud to see me graduate finally and get an education. I think that's pretty important, that most people that are in sport find a way to get something to kind of fall back on. And it felt like something that wasn't sports related that I could achieve. And it made me feel good, because usually I'm only capable of achieving stuff in sport, and outside world was kind of like a little bit difficult for me to kind of feel like I could be successful. So it made me realize what I was kind of worth, and that I could do it just like anybody else. So that was a good moment.
Right. And I think you learn a lot from going to school too. You learn a lot about yourself, which I took journalism at Sheridan. I didn't finish. It just wasn't for me, but I'm so grateful that I went to college, because it just makes you feel so good.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of Haley Wickenheiser. When she quit hockey, she went into med school, and I think you're able to showcase that you can do more than just play a sport, right?
Exactly.
And
this is just a hobby. This is just kind of a dream that we all have. And it's like, we're all just trying to get there. And I've been lucky enough to achieve my, whatever you want to check as your dream. And now it's like, you're only young for so long, and then eventually you need to fall back on something. So, it's good to have other options just in case, obviously, you get injured as well. There's things that could happen. So definitely what Haley was doing is very cool. And, education is very important, I still think, in my mind. And hopefully more people try to find a way to balance education and sport in the future more.
For sure. And I think retiring at 40 years old, most of the time, it's like, what am I going to do for the next 40 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just a little tidbit here. In your bio, you said you love video games, and we had chatted earlier saying you do. What is your favorite video game of all time?
Favorite video game of all time? Isn't it funny that I struggled to answer my proudest moment outside of sport, but favorite video game of all time would have to be Final Fantasy VII.
Wow, you're the second. That's 2 people and that's 2 for 2. Final Fantasy VII.
It was a piece of art. It was. I got emotional playing that game. I remember when I was young, teared up a little bit at parts of it, and which is really weird, because like to me it was a testament to how strong the story was. But yeah, a little bit of a geek out there, but yeah, Final Fantasy VII and was a game that really had an impact on me and made me realize that video games are entertainment, but they're also an art form too, right? So it was cool.
Definitely, and I can relate for sure. Like being pretty severely disabled, playing video games has like it. I can play sports playing video games, right? So I see what you mean. You get emotionally attached to them, and it's hard not to tear up during some games. That's for sure. Getting back
what's your favorite game?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
All time, It's probably the NHL series from EA because I just played those religiously as a kid.
Yeah.
And I could actually win Stanley Cups for the Leafs. So there you go.
Yeah. No, I like what they did with the skill stick and stuff. Like they made it a lot more easier to play, and it's a very cool system that they set up for sure. That's one of my
And
favorite games too.
outside of that, The Last of Us was probably my favorite game ever.
Yeah.
There,
I have to
there's
try
one
that.
there's one where I teared up during the story, so it's all right. We're men. Men should cry, right?
It's all right. Emotions are normal. It's good to cry during video
Exactly.
games.
Getting back into the questions here a bit, what just to focus on my disability awareness, I always ask, what charities or advocacy groups do you support?
Right now, I support and I actually work for an organization called All Sports All People, um, which is a non-for-profit that started a couple years ago to help provide services and programs for rec departments in Simcoe County and York, and provide equipment without rental charges and stuff like that, and other kinds of ways to get people involved in sport. So I get to instruct sledge hockey and wheelchair basketball with kids with rec departments all over the place. And for me, like what we're trying to do is pretty cool, just to get a lot of the exposure out there and get relieve some of the cost that's involved with some of the equipment, and trying to get all the logistics together. And that usually is a bit of a roadblock for most people trying to find somebody to either run a program or have the equipment, and we can offer both. So that's kind of cool. But another charity that I would highly support is it's called the Matt Cook Foundation, and it started just shortly after a good friend of mine and teammate Matt Cook passed away from cancer. He lost his leg, and then he fought it, and then ended up making the team. And just before 2010, it came back and ended up eventually taking his life. So that's his organization. So any two, and those two are the big ones. But also, I've been doing a little bit of work with Easter Seals as well, because I just recently got invited to one of their banquets as a guest and guest celebrity or whatever. And I think that that's a really great cause as well, because I think for me, that's where I met Billy Bridges. And if I hadn't have gone to camp, I may never have met Billy Bridges, and we may never have started playing sledge hockey together. And so there's a lot of things that kind of make me support different things, but those are about the top three for me.
Yeah, and Easter Seals has been big for me. The Easter Seals leaf skate every year. They
Mm-hmm.
do some amazing things, and the other two I've heard of both actually. I remember him passing away. It was really sad because he was quite the guy. I remember he was
Mm-hmm.
a hell of a person, and the fight in him was pretty damn strong. I'll give him that.
Yeah,
And
he
for
definitely
sure.
fought.
Yeah, his memory lives on for sure. I'm glad they started that foundation because it really is a beautiful thing to be able to celebrate someone's life like that. I
Mm-hmm.
really like that because it's sad, yeah, but you can get so much good out of those people. And then thanks for sharing that. I like that. It's cool. So obviously during this whole quarantine thing, it's wearing on everybody and it's a little hard, but that's one of the main reasons I started my blog here was to keep raising the awareness for disabled people, because a lot of times we get left on the back burner, and it's getting better, but it needs to change. How do you think we can continue to raise the awareness for these charities and the disabled community during this time?
Yeah, it's tough. I think we're starting to find the groove. I mean, what you're doing with the video blog, we're going more online. And I actually think that it's creating more dialogue between the right people. Like I've kind of started my own little thing too, where I wanted to be able to voice my opinions without having to bite my tongue or bite my lip or like, hold off what I want to say. So it's good. You're getting a lot more of like honest feedback about what people's views are in that during the lockdown. So I think the best thing to do is just to keep having these conversations with people, like you did with other guests too, and just bring up discussions and just put them out there for people to find, and direct people in the right way to find them. Because I don't know if a lot of the issues are because people don't care. I used to have a weird mindset where I was like, oh, people don't care about accessibility unless it affects someone in their life that they care about, but I think with this whole, there was a cripple camp documentary that was
Yep.
on Netflix not long ago. And I sent a lot of those, I sent that movie on to a lot of friends, and they were like, oh, I didn't even know about this. And I learned so much, and I didn't know it wasn't that long ago. And I'm like, yeah, see, like this stuff is still like so far behind. Like, it's ridiculous. And especially with a lot of the stuff that are on the forefront right now, I don't understand why all of that gets to be bumped ahead of disabled rights and accessibility, when everybody that's walking around in our population can be disabled in a second. So it's more of an education, I guess, educational journey for people like us to do what you're doing, create content, get the content out there, get the information out there, and just say what you believe and put it out there, and hopefully the right people hear it and get educated and get inspired to do something about it, hopefully.
For sure. And I had this conversation. I actually interviewed Rick Mercer, and I was pretty starstruck at first, but he is so for the disabled rights. Like, he just pushes it all the time. He's completely able-bodied. He's built his cottage in Newfoundland completely accessible because he's like, I don't know if I'm going to be disabled, or if I meet some guy that becomes my best friend and I can invite him over. Like, you just don't know. And I think it's, ignorance is bliss can only go so far. It's like, come on, this was only 40 years ago that the states passed the laws, and then we were like 20 years behind them even. And it's just crazy to me how, like, even during COVID, it's like all the able-bodied people get all these benefits and all these checks, and then disabled people are still on their ODSP, not being able to afford anything. It's pretty bad. But
yeah, there's a lot of things that need to change. The ODSP situation needs to change, I learned, because when I got married, that was a scary situation to think about for somebody else who wasn't as physically active as I was and capable of doing other like sources of like other areas of employment, and that they take half of your check away from you based on what your spouse made. But my spouse worked for a pretty good job, like a pretty good corporation, and half of her check was my whole check. So it was like, if I didn't have the ability to play sports and make a bit of an income doing that, where would I have had to work? Like, it would have been horrible. Who wants to marry somebody that has to, so that system's flawed. And then you've got the handicap parking system. That system's super flawed. Maybe not so much in the summer, but I notice in the winter that there's something very wrong about how people park in those spots that really don't need them. And but yeah, you got me going, because like I went through a whole couple months span where I was just getting frustrated with doors. Like, why can't I just go through a door and have it open the way that I want to open it, and not have to have someone run over and then have some awkward confrontation about, like, I've got the door. Yeah. It's not like a pride thing. It's just like, I just don't really like people all the time every day. Like, sometimes I want to just not be bothered by other people. And you go through those days and you just want to be independent and go into the mall, open the door, go in the mall. You don't have to feel like you need help all the time. And I think the biggest thing from this COVID thing is you could really kill two birds with one stone and make every door automatic now and work all the time and have sensors for the elevators, because now everybody's kind of on this equal playing field where they're afraid to touch something. They're afraid to get COVID. They're afraid to do this. So it's like accessibility is kind of starting to show that it's for more than just the disabled. It's for, it's inclusiveness basically in the design of it. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes down the road, and it's going to hopefully work out better for everyone. And we're going to get to see more sensors for elevators and less, doors that we have to pull open and stuff like that, hopefully, because people aren't going to want to touch as many things, right? So
yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and you got to think of moms with babies with strollers, and maybe an old lady with a walker that's not necessarily fully disabled, but it helps more than just us. You know what I mean? It helps everybody.
Yeah. Everything's got to be set up for the progression of human life. Like, everybody just gets old and then they have a disability. It's either going to be your legs or your back or your hip, or, like why do you get to work your whole life and save up to enjoy this retirement or the end of your life, and you can't even go outside because you can't get off a curb because you worked your butt off your whole life and you got a bad back. Like, you should be able to go out and be independent, and society just isn't set up, unfortunately, for most disabled people. So
Yep, it's a shame, but like I said, it's why I'm doing it, and hopefully it gets out to the right people. And I've really enjoyed it. Like it's a lot of fun seeing all the different disabilities and all the different people that work with charities, and it really has been rewarding.
yeah, no,
Definitely.
I think we're getting a little bit more connected than we ever have been as a society or as a world. And I think, like I said, just putting out the content and sharing thoughts and having those discussions, it's going to lead somewhere, because I think everyone's starting to see a bit of the big picture over time.
For sure. Well, that's about all I have for you, Brad. Thank you so much for doing this and helping me raise the awareness. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll hook up over Call of Duty one of these days for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try not to get you killed.
Don't worry, I have the same problem with my teammates, so we'll see how it goes.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Well, take care.
Yeah, you too. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.